intro of Dr. Yarbrough of their structure. Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry. This is Juliet Jones from Universal Family Connection. Welcome to our 12-month series of our structural intervention. It's called Our Power, Our Voice, Our Control. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I'm Juliet Jones, Director of Risk Reduction here. I'd like to thank Chicago Department of Public Health for their support of our cisgender Black heterosexual women community development program. I'd also like to thank our Black Women Supporting Empowering Lifestyle Factors work group, because without the work group women who are comprised of Black and African women, we would not have our structural intervention. We would not be here today presenting our structural intervention to you. So I would like to thank them right away. So, but thank you all. We do a bi-monthly series to, we do a bi-monthly series on Black women's and their access to health care. So we look at the barriers and we also look at the successes and how they obtain their healthcare services. And it is important for us to have these series of structural interventions catered to by Black medical providers. It's important for us to hear and see our Black medical providers to reassure us on our health care. So it is important that you all are tuning in because this gives us voice, it gives us volume, and it also reaffirms of us that we are doing the right thing as Black women, trying to get educated on our health care. So I'd like to thank you all for tuning in.
All right. And I'm Dr. Brittany Martin. I am the CEO of Ford, and I'd like to now introduce our speaker, Dr. Sheila Yarbrough. Sheila is a senior level education administrator with 20 years of experience in teaching, student affairs, business, and leadership training. She is successful in fostering student academic success across disciplines by delivering quality classroom and online instruction through creative student engagement. Dr. Yarbrough is a transformational leader with experience managing a diverse and multicultural workforce and providing faculty development. With her excellent interpersonal skills, she has proven history of cultivating and maintaining collaborative teams and partnerships with college administrators, staff, faculty, and key stakeholders. Dr. Yarbrough is recognized by students as passionate and personable in creating an engaging learning environment. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Yarbrough. I think you're still muted there too.
Yes.
She says all those great things and then I forget to take mute off. So Thank you, Dr. Martin, for saying all those great things. And thank you so much, Ms. Jones, for allowing me to be with you today. I tuned in on several of the sessions. And as we were speaking before we got started, I admire the work that you and your organization are doing. So I feel privileged to be here today. And I am even more overjoyed to talk about a topic that really is important to me. I've been teaching and working with communication for years now, and it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I find myself quite often when I am teaching or when I'm talking about communication, moving into talking about the power of communication. And even more than that, we talk about writing, we talk about reading, we talk about communicating constantly, and communication is all around us, right? Social media, we all get to be sort of our, as we were saying, we get to be our own newscasters now with technology like Zoom. But the communication that I find that we don't spend enough time talking about is intrapersonal communication. And so I'm happy to talk about that with you. I hope that we can get a conversation going about intrapersonal communication, the voice that's inside our head, or voices, some say voices, but the voice that's inside our head. So having said that, I'd like to share my screen, and I'll try not to fumble too much with this part, but let's see. I have a PowerPoint for you. Let's share. I need to make it a bit bigger, I think. And let's see if I can start from beginning. Can everyone see my screen? Dr. Martin, is it?
We're seeing your presenter notes right now. Can you show your other screen?
All right, let me try that. Bear with me, everyone, please.
Mhm.
All right, so we're going to share my other screen.
Mhm.
Screen 2. Let's see what happens with this one. How about that?
It's perfect.
All right, it's perfect. Thank you. So, intrapersonal communication, the power of self-communication. This topic is important to me, and I think it should be of interest to us as human beings, as people, as women and men who are involved with connecting with others, connecting and supporting individuals who might be seeking healthcare, as we are seeking healthcare ourselves, as we are giving care. There are so many reasons to think about intrapersonal communication. And when I talk about this topic, and when I talk about, the places where we can have bad communication with ourselves or bad self-talk, I like to put something happy up, and that's why you see daisies. I'm giving you flowers today. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Chicagoland area, but daisies are a common flower. They just keep coming back every year. Folks call them common. I think they're beautiful. They look like a little bit of sunshine. So with happy thoughts and with that, let's look at a definition or two. Interpersonal communication is basically self-talk. It's the words we say to ourselves, either silently or aloud. And according to researchers, we use self-talk in decision-making, problem solving, but we also use self-talk in self-judgment and in sort of internal conflict as well as internal conflict resolution. So I'd like for you to take a minute to think about, when have you or how have you can do either one or the other, used self-talk today? Did you use it to encourage yourself? Did you use it to solve a problem, to come to a decision? Did you use it to make a judgment about yourself? So let's continue. And there'll be moments for questions and answers after this. So why should we talk about self-talk, or really why should we think about thinking? Because really the self-talk is how we think. It's us. And we're talking about how we talk to ourselves. And to a certain extent, we're also talking about how we might think about ourselves in those quick moments when our words, slip out. And we give words power. So one of the reasons words have power, we can say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But words can harm us. And sometimes the words that we say to ourselves might be some of the more harmful words. So our word choices are based on our experiences. Some of those experiences are positive and wonderful. Some of those experiences could be trauma based. They could be coming from places that are not positive. They could be experiences based on stories or comments that were targeted toward us when we were children, that weren't said in the kindest tone, even by people who may love us dearly. And so the word choices that are based on experiences that are positive, fantastic. We all need those. But the reality is we tend to, and we quite often, we will hang on to or remember those negative, those hurtful words. So when we are bombarded with messages, those words can stick as well. And we're bombarded constantly with messages that are created by others and they're created by others, not perhaps created by ourselves, but they also might be about us. And those words, whether we want them to or not, or sometimes if we're not aware, they can seep into our being and seep into the story that we have about ourselves. And so the words and the messages that come through television, social media, whether it's, Instagram, whatever you're using, Facebook, those words can have an impact over time. And they can also impact how we see ourselves and what we may say to ourselves. So think again too about, what are some of the messages that have come your way outside of you? What have you viewed today? What have you heard today about women, about African-American women, about men, African-American men, about people of color. What have you heard today about women in general that might be positive, and if there was anything that might be negative, or what images may have come our way? So one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to think about how we talk to ourselves, or some of the reasons, is that our self-talk when we are vulnerable, it can be, that can be the time when the more negative terms will sort of kick in and move into our being and who we are. And and so we need to be aware, especially if we are seeking care, if we are caregivers. And in many cases, there may be those of us who are also under medical care, and at the same time, we are caregivers. We might be caregivers down to children, and we might be caregivers up to our parents or across to other family members or significant others, while we are also under medical care. So the opportunity to be vulnerable, to be tired, to be sleep deprived, to be distracted, to be stressed, to be anxious, it might be higher for us if we are, again, caregivers, seeking care, caring for others, or just simply, even if you're not, if you're just going through your day-to-day life and the stressors that surround you, that surround all of us, getting to and from work, managing as we've managed the best way that we can through COVID, trying to procure, trying to make sure that we have what we need to survive and to be able to, take care of our families and take care of ourselves, and all the other things that we have to do that can add stress to our lives. These things can make us more vulnerable, and they can provide moments when those more negative words, the more negative self-talk, or the words that we say to ourselves, can seep in. Now, when we're talking about individuals living with HIV and research findings, I thought it was particularly interesting to share this study. Even though it's a study that is dated in 2005, I think you may find, Ms. Jones, this is your area of expertise, and others who might be listening, we may find that even though this is a study in 2005, that still the research that focuses on the stigma and the pieces we were talking about, individuals not coming to your, it seemed as if individuals were, a little wary of coming to your booth today, and because of the stigma that's attached. Uh, the study cited loss of income, loss of hope, increased feelings of worthlessness, increased internalized stigma, poor care in the healthcare system, especially from professionals not delivering HIV care, loss of reputation in family or in community. HIV-related stigma, affects prevention, keeps people from getting tested, and again, makes disclosure difficult. So the stress can have an impact on, according to the study, on the immune system. And one of the reasons why I think it's important that we continue to look at the self-talk is all of these factors, again, can have an impact on what we say about ourselves and how we think about ourselves. There's a study in Zimbabwe that focused on, and I label this, I was thinking too much, because this is something that they found that many of the individuals who were willing to be participants and share their lived experience, they talked about the fact that thinking sometimes in circles about what was happening to them, their concerns, affected their day-to-day living and their ability to perform tasks. And quite often those tasks, like taking medicine or making it to appointments, were definitely impacted because of the negative self-talk and the concerns that they had that were revolving around about how they were treated, how they were viewed, and the issue of stigma. But again, self-talk, that thinking too much, was definitely a part of what the researchers found to be relevant in the study. So one of the things about looking at self-talk and what we say to ourselves, we say sometimes, and if you've overcome this, I take my hat off to you, but quite often we find ourselves saying those things when we're feeling vulnerable or when we're tired, we're depressed, we're anxious, we're distracted. We may find ourselves saying things that we would not say to anyone else. Those judging statements, I'm stupid. Those uh, comments like I'm a failure, limiting statements, I can't do this or I shouldn't do this. Also, feeling versus fact. We may be feeling a certain way, and then we might make a statement about ourselves as if it is true. I am a bad blank mother. I am a blank daughter, caregiver. I am blank. Um, Also, the catastrophic thinking. And this is something that researchers have found when they're talking about self-talk and doing studies, that even young children learn very early, somewhere along the way, even with the most positive parenting, to start managing or to start using terms that involve negative self-talk. And so catastrophic terms like my life is over, or I feel that I will never, can be changed and should be thought about and stopped when they come. But the problem is we're not always aware and they can slip in really quickly. So what can we do when those thoughts come our way? One of the things that I've often, folks have heard me talk about, is the awareness piece. The awareness. Once we're aware, once you know, it's easier then to start taking note of. And one of the things that we can take note of is paying attention to situations, to people that might trigger, or to people that might trigger that negative self-talk. Monitoring our own words. And even if it means if I am having a bad day, or if I'm driving and I'm running late, I find myself, saying something and it's like, stop, okay? And I treat myself with a bit more kindness, and we'll talk about that a bit more. But by paying attention to situations or people that are triggers, by monitoring our words, and then the other thing is we can interrupt the negative story. And again, the story is created by our experiences. It's created by what we may have heard others say about us. We can stop that story or start to change it by changing the words. And there are a couple of people who may have been on here today who've heard me say, okay, we got to reframe that. And I've said, I've got to reframe that. So reframe your words to be less judgmental. We can reframe our words to be a little less catastrophic. It's things are coming to an end. It may be difficult now, but that doesn't mean that life is coming to an end. The other thing that we can do, the judgmental piece. No, you know what? I didn't do a great job, but I'll do better next time. That's a better way of reframing or changing the words that we might use. And it's a more hopeful way. So the other thing that we can do sometimes is to do something physical. And I'd like to know from you, especially when we open up, and I can see that there are some chats, what do you do to interrupt your negative story? Do you do something physical, for instance? I think it's a good idea to write, and I've tried this, so I'm not telling you something that I haven't tried, is to write what I want to say or even ask if it's a question, especially if I am going into a situation that might be stressful to me. If I am going to a care provider, and I've done this before with my daughter in particular, I've asked the questions that I want to ask to be prepared. And also if you're going to other settings where even if it's an interview, perhaps practicing writing down what you'd like to say. Or the other side of writing down is writing down those phrases that you find you're saying to yourself, writing them down, and then next to what you write, writing what the reframe is, writing what the more positive, the kinder statement might be. And that's an exercise that I've tried before. And I think it works because it's a way of seeing it. Not only are you saying it to yourself, you're thinking of a reframe, You then write it. You can see what you've written, or you can type it. You can see what you've typed, and then go through the process of actually practicing that reframing of what you've said or what you want to say that is a bit different and a bit kinder again. So, okay, we've got more daisies here again about sunshine and kindness. The other thing, maybe moving to another space. Have you ever walked into a space and it didn't feel good for you? And it brought back memories, or it brought back moments, or it allowed you to be a bit more vulnerable. And those statements that are negative creeped in, or worrying statements, or statements that simply set you off or change your mood. Dancing, singing, reading, walking, um, finding ways to interrupt the negative story is something that we can do that can also be physical, not just the mental practice of saying the words differently or reframing the words, but sometimes we need to move or do something physical to take our mind off, or to reframe, or to change. And then one physical cue, there are a couple of physical cues that researchers have found that work. For instance, having a rubber band on your wrist, and if you find that you are, making a self-statement, popping that rubber band, or tapping your fingers, or whatever might work for you, but finding perhaps a physical cue that can help you with reframing and stopping the negative story, the negative self-talk, or the negative comments. So the reframing statements, I kind of moved ahead a bit here, but I will do better next time. This is an experience for growth. Other reframing statements, just saying, hey, I did well. No questioning, no talking about it. Simply, I did well. I got through it, or I survived it. Reframing questions. We talk about reframing statements, but sometimes a reframing question can also open us up to the possibility of thinking differently about a situation, or thinking differently, thinking or changing our thoughts, and thinking differently about whatever might be stressing us. What do I need to, what do I do? What do I need to do this? Instead of saying, I can't do this, it might be reframed to a question. What do I need to do this? Who should I ask for help? Where can I find help? So those reframed questions open you up, or open us up to more avenues, instead of a statement that simply stops when that period stops. I can't do this, or I can't. The question, what do I need to do this, opens us up to the possibility of opportunity, of getting help, of finding other ways. So here are some of my references. And I will move back to, I'll stop screen sharing. And I'm not quite sure where Dr. Martin would like to go next.
I think we can start to take questions from here, from individuals in the audience, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Okay, perfect. So question that I think somebody asked a little bit earlier was, can you give an example of how someone with HIV in particular would like reframe some negative comments, because I know that's our primary audience here. Because I know once you deal with any type of health element, how do you kind of overcome those negative thoughts that are associated when you receive a diagnosis?
Right.
How can you forget that you're HIV positive?
Mm.
Well, I don't know. You said forgive or forget?
Forget.
Well, and part of this, the self-talk isn't about forgetting, because we still need to remember so that we can do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, right? The positive self-talk, or the focuses on self-talk, is when we start to talk about ourselves in a manner that might be, and there was an article that I found where someone said, everyone's looking at me, or no one will ever care for me again. And the never part is the part that we might think about reframing. Mm-hmm. And also the other piece that might be there is there are people that do care, and it might mean even stepping outside of our circle. Ms. Jones, your clinic, right? The work that you do, you have people who care and who are there for support. And so the self-talk piece, whether if you're HIV positive, if you have other, issues in life that you're dealing with, it's not about making it go away. It's about the self-talk piece, and the awareness piece is about helping reaching that part of ourselves that needs sort of the support, giving ourselves the self-support to reframe and to think differently so that we can reach out to get the support and help that we need. In the case where the person said in the study that it was she was thinking too much, and that thinking and was involved in worrying and ruminating and going around in circles, distracted her to a certain point where she'd forget to take medication that was important. So I think with what I've talked about, and I'm respectful, and I want to make sure that I'm being respectful of everyone. It's not about forgetting, but it is about supporting yourself and giving yourself the self-love and the self-affirmation and the positive words to have hope, to reach out for what you might need or who you might need, to realize that it's not that everyone, even if there are people who are negative, there are people who bombard us and tell us, well, you shouldn't have, or this is, there are people who will say these things, right? We've faced difficulty, but then the issue is, how do we move beyond those hurtful words without internalizing them and letting them stop us from getting the help and getting to the loving and kind words that can take their place.
Thank you. And just like you said with the study, how, that stigma, it could be so internalized. And now, just as you said, you didn't take your medicine, or you don't care, you don't go to the doctor. And then once you have that support, with this information, practice it, go through those different things that were highlighted, change your words, do something physical, reframing your questions and your statements, and even moving yourself from the space. How about, if some people trigger it, make you do those negative talk to yourself, remove yourself from that person's circle as well. And then what you do when you do build yourself up with all of those, like you said, the self-affirmation and the support of others too can help you get there. Like, as Dr. Yarbrough stated. And then now you're going to practice it. You're going to practice it with self, and then you're going to practice with others. So other people will see that. And so that will become you. There's another thing that remind me, there's this young lady, she did one of those TED Talks. And she said, one line or one word or one illness, one story doesn't define me. So go beyond HIV, go beyond diabetes, go beyond if you were poor. I know when I was little, we didn't have shoes. Okay, well, go beyond that now. That doesn't define who you are. That one line, that one story doesn't define who you are. There's in this month, there's 30 days in a month. So imagine all those stories that could come into play. And 365 days of a year. Imagine all those stories that could come into play when you do have those self-talk, reaffirming, re-asking things. I have to state this. My son, he goes to the negative. It doesn't matter. He can wake up that way and go to bed that way. Like, wow, where you get that from? All I said was hello. So, so thank you for that. I just wanted to share that. And
that's actually a good segue into the next question to actually, this person.
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I knew I was going to do that. I pressed the button.
It's okay.
So our next question, statement first. Sometimes I feel I am the only one that negative things just happen to over and over again. What do you do in a situation like that?
I think seeing that and it can be, or feeling that way can be devastating. It feels like when you've got a hit after a hit after a hit. And I actually saw something today. I was going through old emails and I looked at something that was dated back, because I am an email hoarder, I admit it. I looked at something that was dated back in 2012. And for a minute, it brought me back to a very bad time and several things that had happened. And I remember at that time thinking, I will never get out of this. I remember, I can be negative too. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with everyone. That I will never get out of this. This will never change. But there were folks who talked to me, and and there was a time when I didn't talk to anyone about, what was bothering me and what was going on in my life. And I found the place and started reading and thinking until I got to a point where I could talk to other people. And then I found out that there were others. I found places or and counseling. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you there too, where I got some positive feedback and where I found that there were others who also, had experienced similar things. And didn't mean that the things in my life that were difficult went away. They were still there and, continued. But what was important for me, and what I'm so glad that I was able to sort of start practicing, was number one, speaking my truth, reaching out for support, and then sort of day by day, remembering the positive things that also happened during the day. One of the things, and I remember that and carried it on at the time, my daughter was really small and she just turned 18. We still, unless I fall asleep, and sometimes she remembers doing it before I fall asleep or before she falls asleep, it's like, tell me one good thing or one positive thing or one thing that you liked about today. So she's in her room, I'm in my room, and I was like, hey, tell me one good thing that happened today. And, she might think of something or she'll ask me the question. And it's a time to sort of step away from those difficulties, even if most of the day was difficult, to find something that happened, or some experience. And it may be a small experience. It may be, the fact that you got all the clothes folded, right? That it could be something like that that can make a difference and add to that body of language that is positive, that can take the place of some of the negative. It doesn't mean that those difficult times don't go away, but it also can give us enough support to reach out and to talk and to find places and people where there's a shift, where we get the support that we need and we get other folks who may be able to help us, find the positive things, like get that job when we've been looking for one for some time, or give us information that we needed.
And
I
we
hope
have
that
a
answered your
question.
question.
I think that was great. And that this question is a good follow-up question from Marie. How do you help someone who constantly sees the world or every situation in a negative way?
That could be a hard one. Juliet, you mentioned your son. I tend to fight not being that way myself at times, but I think one of the things is, number one, you care for them, you know them, you don't give up on them, right?
Right.
And maybe sneaking in those positive things and catching them, or if you're with them and you're doing something like, it's a beautiful sunny day, right? And you're outside basking in the sun and maybe bringing that to their attention, or they do something that they're surprised that it turned out well. If you can catch those moments and reward those moments by saying something positive to give them a reminder that, yeah, that was a good thing that just happened in my life or that happened today. I hope that helped, Marie.
And then one thing too, just to add to it, it's about moving on from it as well. And when you do catch it that they did that one good thing, and you mentioned that, and then you notice some people go past that and want to go back to the negative. You said, excuse me, did you hear? I said you look beautiful, or that was great that you folded the clothes in that manner. So let's talk about that. Don't go past that. And when you say the rubber band, I have mine already. I do, and I snap it quite often.
But you make a good point about not going past that, because it can be easy. It can be easy to just let them, okay, you say it, they didn't accept it, and then you move on to the next thing. But I do think that backing up and sort of reinforcing that feedback to say,
right,
okay, look, did you hear what I just said? Do you realize what you just accomplished or what you just did?
right.
No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Don't downplay it. If we can dwell on the negative, we can dwell on the good
Build on the
too.
positive.
Right.
Right. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we had a comment in here earlier from Teresa. I just want to read it out loud. So she says, I have began to travel, going places, enjoying life since all four of my children are grown and doing amazing things in their life. And that I don't have to worry anymore about them. When I found out I was HIV positive, and I was worried about who was going to take care of them if I die. I don't have to worry anymore. So I just wanted to read her comment because I think that was like a good way to kind of look at things. She's, enjoying her life, and she's, her children are doing well. But do you want to comment on that at all, Dr. Yarbrough? I just wanted to acknowledge her for sharing that in the
And
chat
thank
with
you.
us.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And
Mhm.
congratulations on taking care of yourself and taking care of your children and getting them to a point where they're self-sufficient. Because you did that. You did that.
Yep.
And now you're taking the time for yourself. So, it's great because I would imagine that making that transition from, worrying and caring about your children and watching them grow and being concerned to the joy of seeing them sort of, branch out on their own and do what you raised them to do, to thrive, right? Now you got your free time. I would imagine that taking those steps to get out and travel, that was a process for you. So I hope you're still, while you're out enjoying everything, I hope you're still patting yourself on the back. And I appreciate you for sharing that.
And then we mentioned youth a lot. Do you think the strategy to help like a young person, like a teenager or like a young adult, is different from, someone who's a bit older?
Yeah, I think there's some common points, the reframing, finding the positive words, rewarding the movement, getting up. I think those things are common. There are worksheets and other activities online for young kids to really in their language, in language appropriate, an appropriate language for their age groups, to start writing down the good things, the positive things. But I think reminded, because all too often when we're busy and distracted and stressed, we can snap on those negative things. But again, like Juliet said, reminding and reinforcing the positive. And what I started doing with my daughter before we uh, went to sleep, asking her of something positive, was because I wanted her to sleep and I wanted to be able to go to sleep with a positive memory, sort of one of the last thoughts before we drifted off. Now, I didn't always drift off because sometimes I stay up still worrying, but I at least wanted her to focus, as she ended her day, on something positive. So I do think that this can be used. There's material out there that is more, age appropriate. And because again, children, young people, there are all the messages that come their way about how they should be or what they should do. Um, as we've gone through COVID, have we seen how people of color are treated in the media? Children, they've been exposed to that. There were children who were taking pictures of what happened and sharing what happened with George Floyd. So our children see a lot. We can try to protect them as much as we want to, but they see and know a lot. So I think finding ways to have them see the positive, to continue to be hopeful for the future, is very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I noticed a lot of the particular programming going along. People are trying to reframe and reimagine things. You've seen the bad, you've seen the ugly. Well, now they're trying to, like you said, beautify things, like with the daisies. So I noticed a lot of programming is geared towards reframing and reimagining things. But then that also comes with people telling their story. Tell your best story. This is your chance to tell, your best story, or the story that you never told and you want to tell now. This is the moment. This is the moment. I would take advantage of all these virtual formats as well. Sometimes that we don't want to even look at ourselves in the mirror. Well, get on the video, turn on your video and see yourself. You have to do things like that to turn things around as well.
Mhm. There are, I'm glad you said that. There are so many opportunities out there when it comes to mental health, when it comes to things like fitness and connecting that to mental health, where we're seeing people who look like us, where we're seeing people who who are not shaped like what, you know, the media may put out there as the perfect image for someone who should be doing something, you know, physical, or who are the people who are visiting places. Now, the good thing about social media, we can see more of what people of color, what women are doing out in the world and enjoying themselves. There are a couple of places that I subscribe, like there's this woman named, it's Jessamine. She has her Facebook site is Fat Girl Running. And she's been hosted on a number of places. She's written a book and she's out running. It may not always be the fastest run, but she's out, you know, enjoying the world and outside, despite what the typical runner that gets highlighted looks like, despite facing racism and sexism in many cases. She's still out there. And I saw a little piece of footage where she was somewhere out like in a wooded stream, barefoot in the water, and she decided to sing a song, and someone recorded it, that she'd learned in high school. And really, it was about sort of cooling waters and out, and it was a beautiful moment. She was out there, an African-American woman, you know, out in nature and enjoying herself and sharing it with the world. And it was really kind of beautiful to see. So we can talk about the negatives, for instance, for social media, but we can also weed through and find positive. And one of the best things I think now is, especially as we move toward, you know, recovering and moving through, you know, COVID and so much that's happened in the last year and a half to 2 years, that the opportunity to see people who look like us and others who are positive and who care and want to make change, it's out there.
Now, are you familiar with the spoon therapy, Dr. Yarbrough?
I've heard of it, but yeah, please go on.
Now, I'm not going to go into great detail because I'm not an expert on it, but I started the year off like that with my sisters. We share a morning text every morning we don't miss a text. So I started the year off talking about spoon therapy. I said, hey, you all, we got 365 days. And so, you know, how many spoons are you working with? And I tried to, you know, give an example. I said, you can't reuse the spoons, you know, you can, if you run out of spoons, you can borrow from someone else, you know, and it's just an encouragement just to get people going on. This was a new year, you know, we're still in the pandemic. And one of my sisters was like, I didn't get it. And, you know, but it was just being supportive of each other, sharing. Hey, if you can't get out of bed, guess what? Text that and maybe we can send those words to you so we can get you out of the bed, you know. And so that was my analogy of trying to explain the spoon therapy to her. So if you can get an analogy on it, please enlighten me.
Well, no, I like that analogy where you're reaching out and you're sharing, you're giving, you know, whether, you know, it's a spoon of a positive thought or, you know, something helpful, a tip. You know, I think that sharing that and the fact that you're doing it consistently is so important, that you and your sisters have gotten together, whether you might get it that day or not, or whether you like, I don't want the spoon. I don't want a spoon. Just let me stay in the bed. Right. But the fact that you're doing it consistency is another way to just build that bond and tighten the bond that you already have as sisters. And along the way, a word gets dropped, right? Or an option or a possibility opens up for your sisters. I love the idea.
Thank you. And like you said, we can't dwell on things. And so that creates the internalized stress for us by dwelling on the negative. And so we just gotta, you know, reframe our mind, you know, our thinking, so that, you know, those stressors won't hamper our health, because it can stop you from doing whatever. And, you know, you just forget about doing things because you forgot, because your mind was so convoluted with negatives.
And that's what people, they stated it in the study. They shared their lived experiences. It's like it was too hard. We were too focused. Said that they were so focused on what they were worrying about that it was hard to take the other steps to really take care of themselves. And so I think I'm not one, I'm very practical. Dr. Martin knows that. I tend to be, there's whimsy, but there's practical too. But I'm not saying things go away and won't happen, but it really is focusing on how can we give ourselves a sort of support and positivity and so that we can get the help that we need and so that we can take care of ourselves as we need to.
Thank you. And then there's that FOMO, fear of missing out on things. And so we're trying to be for everyone, but we have to start with self first. So thank you. Thank you.
And I think we could maybe take 2 more questions, and then we're gonna wrap up and tell you guys about some of the other programs that we have coming up within the next month. So earlier you mentioned self-care to us. Can you tell us a little bit more about how self-care ties into your topic?
Well, I think the self-care piece is what I'd said a bit ago is being kind to yourself is a form of self-care. Creating kind words and focusing them, we give kind words to others easily, but turning those kind words back on ourselves, I think, is a form of self-care. And then there might be other things. So communication could be nonverbal, it could be images, it could be words, those things that are pleasing to the eye. If I put the daisies in, you might not be able to afford daisies or find them. It could be the dead of winter. But if you have access to pictures of those things that make you happy, I think that's a form of self-care. So, there are things that might cost money that we can do, right? And our purchases like flowers or, eating your favorite food. But I think finding those small things, we can find opportunities for self-care and our appreciation of the small things of, if there are, and I think asking, if there's anybody in the audience that if there's a simple thing that you do, or if there's a phrase that you say to yourself, especially since we're revolving around self-talk, I think that's important. But I also think that affirming, we've talked about, I've heard others on in your series talk about affirmations, and that's a form of self-talk too, where you say, I can do this, I can fake it till I make it, I can get through this moment or go to this interview or speak to this doctor about what I need. I think that's incredibly important and a form of self-empowerment as well as self-care. When you're advocating for yourself, when you're telling yourself that you can do that, even if it means practicing. Remember, I talked earlier about writing down what you might need to ask or need to say, because it can be daunting, right? To talk to someone in a medical setting or any other setting about what you need and what you want. And I think asking for what we need is a fantastic form of self-care, but it may need to be supported by those positive words and the affirmation that I can do this, and it may take practice. So I think, the self-care, I could say, right, I could say things like, light candles if that's the thing that works for you, or, do incense, meditating, praying. Those things are wonderful forms of self-care. Asking for help, asking for support, that's a form of self-care too. So there are those things that we can do, and we could list like, oh, go get a manicure, go get a pedicure. I'm not opposed to those. But there are other things that we can do that don't cost money that can have a long-term lasting effect on how we see ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, and how we support ourselves and help us move toward getting the self-care that we need outside. But also, again, I still see affirmative words and self-talk as a form of self-care.
And then final question. So social media and the media, I know that those kind of feed into negative self-talk as well. What are some strategies that people can put into place to sort of combat the things that we see on a daily basis?
We can choose what we want to look at. We can turn some things off or decide that I'm just not going to check Twitter. I'll admit that I started looking at Twitter quite a bit, especially around a certain time over the last 4 years. And there's a point where it's like, I'm not going to spend my morning looking at this craziness anymore because it just makes me mad. So I stopped. And I was curious and I wanted to look, but I didn't. And it took a couple of minutes, or it took a couple of days, actually, not just minutes, but days. So I think there's a point where we have to realize that we might need to step back. And it's okay. If you disable that app, you can put it back. If you need to disable it, or if you can just avoid looking at it, fine. But those notifications that pop up if you're looking on your phone, maybe disable some of those notifications so you won't be reminded to check, because we get into the habit, right? That's the beauty of social media. We get into patterns of habits of checking, and that's how audiences are built. But I also think what I was saying earlier about choosing who and what you want to view. And the good thing about social media is there's so much out there. I like outdoor things too. I subscribe to National Geographic on Instagram, and just pictures of the world and all its beauty, and nature is one of the things that when I see that, it makes me happy. So I like that. But I think cultivating your feed, that you're the marketing person, Dr. Martin. Did I use the right term here? But cultivating your feed so you choose the things that come to you, and you're not a recipient who is simply bombarded by whatever comes at you. I think that can make a difference. But it can mean a choice, and it can mean making a choice and practicing what not to look at, and doing the work, maybe talking to others about what they find interesting. I found that the on Facebook, the Fat Girl Running, and that's what it's called, site, because she'd been called that so much, she decided to just own it, and that's. But I found it because one of my daughters, a parent of one of my daughter's classmates, who's a doctor who runs. And I'm not fit. I try. I don't run, but I admire people who do. And so she mentioned it. I found the website. And what I like looking at and what I like experiencing is seeing individuals try to fulfill their best, to fulfill their dream and what they want to do, and connect with each other in a manner that is safe, so that they are supported and not feeling ostracized because they don't fit a particular mold.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Dr. Yarbrough, for sharing that information with us today. We're excited to have you. And how can the audience find you again or learn more about the work that you're doing?
Well, I didn't expect that question. So Dr. Martin can find me. And I have a website that I've not worked on very much, so I probably shouldn't mention that. But I don't know, Dr. Martin, if anybody wants to find me again, she definitely knows how. I can be reached at SheilaYarbrough@gmail.com. SheilaYar, my last name, BROUGH, @gmail.com. SheilaYarbrough@gmail.com.
Thank you. And we'll also share the slides, because I think they were great. I was writing some of the things down, and I thought it was awesome, some of the things that you highlighted. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then audience, we are going to have another presentation this month. So typically we did these sessions on the third Thursday of every month. So this is nice that we're going to come together a little bit more often. So the next session is going to be June 17th at 3:00 Central Time. And the speaker is going to be Cassandra Esperant. She is a pharmacist that practices HIV and pre-exposure prevention. She believes that educating the urban community will decrease the disparities in the HIV pandemic due to institutionalized racism. As a Black woman, she is passionate about decreasing the divide in the Black communities by empowering them to take initiatives to lessen the divide and take back control. So again, she's a pharmacist. She's going to be here with us 2 weeks from now. If you have any specific questions, I think if HIV is something that you are managing now, like she would be a great person to ask questions about, specifically about like drug interactions and things like that. So we're excited to have her here. And now I just want to throw it back to Juliet so she can remind us what her organization is and any final remarks that she wants to close us out with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Martin. And thank you, Dr. Sheila Yarbrough. This was great. It was great. We all need that self-talk and how to deal with that inner talk. as well, how to, like you said, to reframe statements and questions and so forth. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to thank our work group members for joining in, as well as Universal Family Connection staff for joining in. And I also like to thank Chicago Department of Public Health for sponsoring our cisgender Black heterosexual women community development program. And I would like to thank Dr. Martin for her moderation and the communication and marketing that she has done so far. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to Our Power, Our Voice, Our Control. This is our actually bi-monthly series so that we can do away with the racial inequities and health disparities that Black women face by accessing health care. And so it's about solutions, and we have plenty of solutions from Dr. Sheila Yarbrough, as well as the other Black medical panelists that we have. So we'd like to thank you all for joining in, and thanks for sharing your story. That was powerful. That was powerful. So I'd like to thank you all, and you have a great evening. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.